Mick,
Hi.
welcome to the interview for recordproduction.com and Resolution magazine. You've got such a wide-ranging career. You've worked with so many artists in so many studios. What inspires you now when you sit down and think of all the... is it still the reference point of the actual musicians playing in the room?
Well, that and sense of arrangement, because it's not a matter of reproducing what's happening in the room, and we are making records. We're not making recordings. We're making records. So what inspires me is still that thing of what makes a record sound great. And that's one word that deals with all aspects of a record, not just the sonic aspect, but its impact, its emotional communication, its expression, the lyrics, the performance of the singer, the melodies, all of those things are still there and still work in the same way. So, and I'm still hearing, I listen to the radio every day, still hear stuff which inspires me to go and do things differently. And I still check out what other people are doing. I still read interviews myself, and think, oh, that's interesting. I better try that next time, because that's it's the same as it's ever been.
Yes, you've always had a reputation for pushing the boundaries of recording techniques.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I think Dave Ruffy said that.
Did he really?
Yeah.
How very nice of him. I saw him recently, actually. Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, what did I do on the Ruts album that was particularly boundary pushing? I must have done something, but yeah. No, it's a matter of just looking for new things, because there's such a lot of stuff out there. You have to think in terms of making records that have got something that's original. That's a very English thing, I think, anyway, to think about being original anyway, with music and lots of different art forms. But I think in terms of the way records sound, the way you go about things, and that thing about, if you could create something sound-wise that's happening in the studio, then that inspires the performer as well. If you make something sound a certain way which they didn't expect, then that can stimulate a particular kind of performance and give the performance an edge. And essentially, when the listener listens to a record, it's essentially the performance they're listening to. People I know who aren't in the industry don't tend to talk to me about sounds. You've got to do something very extreme sonically with a record for the average guy in the street to go, oh, that sounds different. Essentially, they're listening to the performance, they're listening to instruments and singers, and that's what gets to them. So that's the thing you need to spend a lot of time stimulating when you're producing records.
So it's like a virtuous circle between the sound that you're making and...
Oh yeah, I guess that's kind of like why I was talking before about, I like the idea of when you're creating, say, a guitar sound with using certain effects, then I like to record that sound because it's there for all the other work that gets done after that. Whoever's singing or playing other parts is hearing the character of that sound. So yeah, absolutely, it's a stimulus.
Is there maybe a sense, though, that in the tools that we're using now, it's a bit like kind of word processors or something? There's so many features in them that, whereas with the analog gear it was designed for a particular targeted process.
Oh yeah, but we always found bizarre ways of using things in ways we weren't supposed to. Using distortion on vocals, even then, because and this ever since Joe,
distortion on vocals.
Well, on records that are happening now, Muse, who else? PJ Harvey, Bowie to a certain extent. Distortion is different sorts of distortion, but different. These things came from the people they worked with. But with Muse actually, I think they use a lot of those techniques live. But it's kind of maverick sense. You're presented with this piece of gear, or we've designed this as a new idea for you to use, and it does this, it does phasing, or it does distortion or something. So I think most engineers and producers have this sort of maverick sort of idea. Well, let's think about using something different, and let's turn the knobs all the way. I know we're not supposed to, but let's see what it sounds like. Trying to find new ways of doing things, so you abuse the equipment to do that. But Yeah, it's the creative process. You want to do something new all the time, and things get boring if you're doing the same way. I mean, I deliberately look for different ways to mic up drums, for example, these days, because I've recorded so many drum kits where you have two kick mics, two snare mics, mics on every tom, a hi-hat mic, all close mic, and then two sets of ambience mics, and you just set it up and it's 10 tracks, 12 tracks, whatever. It's just boring to do it the same way.
So where have you got to now?
Oh,
Glyn Johns?
interesting. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Where are you at?
Pull the
now?
mics. Well, the last thing I did, I think I used two kick drum mics. One top snare mic, one overhead. The hi-hat mic was about 10 feet away, and some room mics in a couple of funny places. No mics on the toms. It's just a matter of you have to be aware of doing things automatically and then stop doing that, because you do. Quite often, if you're an engineer on a session, you're presented with a certain amount of time, and sometimes you have to play it safe, because you have not play it safe, but you have to do something that you know is going to work, because you haven't got time to experiment. But when you do have time to experiment, I think you just have to deliberately steer yourself away from the things that you know work. Just force yourself to do something different. So that's the only way new stuff's going to happen. It's like the Studio 2 drum sound.
What were the milestones for you?
Oh my goodness, milestones. Well, I mean, I'm lucky to have worked with two artists of whom I was, before I worked with them, a great fan, which is Frank Zappa and Van Morrison. Wide-ranging musical styles, of course, but I mean, I love what they had listened to their albums and bought their albums for several years before I worked with them. So they're probably the two biggest milestones, I think.
I've met Van. I've recorded him briefly.
Okay.
And I mean, he has got a reputation as being somewhat demanding, as has the other artist you mentioned, Frank. And
in different ways.
Is that something that, I mean, you also perhaps have a reputation as being a demanding taskmaster?
You'll have to speak to people I work with.
Of your assistants.
Well, that's for all kinds of different reasons. I mean, Van has a reputation for being demanding, but essentially, I don't find him that demanding. I mean, he just wants the job done. That's all it is. Which is, and fast. I mean, from a musician's point of view, that means you have to recognise what the job is, and then be capable of doing it, and then doing it without messing around too much. And as long as you get to the point and get on with it, that's. And if that's demanding, then I think everybody should be like that. I mean, what can you say? Yeah.
Were they demanding of you, or is Van demanding of
not
you?
particularly. No, as long as you. I mean, the thing is, okay, well, I guess it's what's demanded is a certain degree of intuition. You need to kind of you need to understand the way he works, and realise that he wants it to happen quickly. Because if you're improvising, if you hang around, it doesn't happen. That's where you've got to get the first takes, because it's never going to happen again in a lot of cases. John Donne is a classic example of that, although he did do 2 takes, I seem to remember. But also, so from my point of view, I make a point of making sure the studio environment is conducive and enabling to that process. Because he just wants to walk in, he's got millions of other things he wants to do. He wants to walk in, perform the song, and go out and do something else. Doesn't want to hang around. So you've got to set everything up so that can happen. So the first thing you do is make sure he doesn't turn up till 4 in the afternoon, and make sure the band turns up at 10 o'clock in the morning. So at least you have a fighting chance to get sounds and headphones and everything together. Or longer than that if possible, a day if you can. Because then then you know you're ready and you're not stressed, and because you've got it all prepared. Also, I mean, having done it before means you know what you're up against. So if you make sure it's all prepared, and you know that when he walks in, he can walk through the door into the control room, into the studio, pick up the mic and play and sing, and you've got it, then that's what he wants. So as long as you can do that, then that's what it's about. So yeah, I guess you have to have the understanding to realise that that's what's necessary.
Do you have your own assistant now?
No,
no. You have I think it was Steve Powell. No, it was Alan Douglas said.
Right.
Mix a demon.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Oh right. Maybe a word around. So that's what he means by that, but no, I mean, I suppose that's fairly demanding. But I mean, it only stems from having a certain standard, which I impose on myself. I guess I want to achieve something, and sometimes you have limited time and resources with which to do that. So that's I mean, I like that challenge myself. I like being under pressure because it brings something out of me, I think. And I guess there's a sense in which that probably gets transferred to the people who are helping me do that. But I like to work at a certain pace as well. I like to keep things moving and turning over because I enjoy that sense of getting there. And so I guess people around you who are helping you do that have got to be on the case. They've got to be quick. They've got to realise what's required and be able to do it. So I suppose if that's demanding, then that's what it is.
I mean, it's a mentality that a previous generation of musicians also had. But how do you find it with musicians today? I mean, they're much more aware of all the possibilities and recording processes. Do you find there's a sort of less of an edge there?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Because I think if you're talking about bands, for example. I mean, if you put a band together, it's because it's an attraction of like-minded musicians, 4 or 5 people who get something out of writing and performing together, and that's still the same. That's still getting together in a room, picking up instruments and microphones, and performing a song in a live sense. I mean, gigs haven't really changed that much. You still get up on the stage and you're in front of an audience and you've got to deliver. There's no real, in spite of the technology that exists in studios now, there's no real substitute for having to deliver that on stage. And to me, that's still the essence of what a live band's about. So when you go into a studio, that's still a reference point for me. And so when I'm working with a band, we start in a rehearsal room, kick around the song, do pre-production tests, it's called blah 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 blah. Go in the studio, that's still the origin of what you do. You set the band up live, and I suppose I make a demand on them. I mean, if I came across musicians in a band who were aware of the technology, the safety net that they've got now, say, and who wanted to exploit it, I'd probably discourage them from doing that. I'd probably encourage them to. Well, I have done, in fact. But I think musicians respond to that anyway.
It is this kind of theme that some producers, in the Resolution interviews, there's been comments about the proliferation of tracks, of receiving these huge things to mix, where everybody has deferred the decision.
That's a track. Yeah, if you've got to do that, sure. But if you're mixing and you're on the receiving end of that, I mean, there is an upside, I suppose. You have a tremendous. It depends how much time you've got. You may find stuff that. Is actually diamonds in the rough type of thing, that material that you didn't expect. But yes, you've got to spend time going through it, and that's a danger, I guess. I mean, I've always liked to make decisions early anyway. I like to move forward with the session. And to be honest, 90% when I go into the studio with a band, I've already got a mental picture of the theme of what we're doing anyway, and the process is achieving that. It's sure, I'd say 90% because you've got to leave room for, not that you've got to, but it's advisable certainly to leave room for all the sort of spontaneous things that can happen in the studio. But in terms of the way a particular song is going to end up, it's pretty much, in my mind, I like to have that before I go in almost, So the idea of having all kinds of stuff lying around, I think it's distracting. Let's make a decision, let's do that. I like recording instruments with effects, for example, maybe on separate tracks, but at least with effects, so that the musician can hear what they're creating with that sound, and it's there in the mix and stuff. Leave it all till later. So I don't tend to go for that. But maybe I'm old school. I come from when you only had 16 tracks and you had to make decisions. But I think it's a healthy thing. But most people are